I'm Mackenzie Walker, 32, and 5 years ago I walked away from my toxic family to build my own life. Last month, I received an elegant invitation to my grandmother's 80th birthday dinner. Despite my success, the thought of facing them again made my stomach twist into knots. Something felt off about this sudden reunion, especially when I noticed my sister Emma's handwriting on the envelope. I had no idea she was planning to expose me as a failure in front of everyone. Before I dive into what happened at that dinner table, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to distance yourself from toxic family members. Trust me, what happened next is something you won't believe. To understand why I cut ties with my family, you need to know what growing up in the Walker household was like. We lived in an affluent suburb of Boston in a pristine colonial with perfect landscaping that matched our perfect family image. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. Inside those walls, appearances were everything. My father, Franklin Walker, was a senior investment banker who measured success in dollar signs and social connections. My mother, Diane, was obsessed with maintaining our family's reputation in their elite social circle. And then there was my sister Emma, 4 years older and the golden child who could do no wrong. From my earliest memories, the dynamics were clear. Emma was brilliant, beautiful, and destined for greatness. I was the disappointment, the one who needed to try harder, dress better, speak more eloquently. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, playing on repeat through every report card, piano recital, and family dinner. When Emma got straight A's, my A- in calculus was a sign I wasn't applying myself. When Emma was accepted to Harvard, my acceptance to Boston University was met with thin smiles and "at least it's a good school." The constant comparisons left deep scars that I still carry. My father controlled everything, especially money. He paid for our education, but with strings attached. We had to study what he approved of, live where he thought appropriate, and follow the career paths he outlined. Any deviation from his plan was met with threats of cutting financial support. "As long as I'm paying the bills, you'll do as I say," was his favorite phrase, wielded like a weapon whenever I showed signs of independence. My mother's approach was subtler, but equally damaging. She specialized in passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern. "That dress is a bold choice, sweetie. Not everyone can pull off something so interesting," she would say at family gatherings, or "I'm just worried about your future." Not everyone has Emma's natural talents. Emma learned from the best. She became expert at taking credit for my ideas, undermining my confidence, and ensuring she always stayed the favorite. In high school, when I developed a fundraising concept that raised record amounts for our school charity, Emma somehow ended up receiving the recognition. In college, when I mentioned my business ideas at family dinners, they would be dismissed, only to hear Emma present the same concepts months later to enthusiastic approval. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandmother Ruth. Unlike her daughter Diane, Grandma Ruth valued authenticity over appearances. During family gatherings, she would often find me hiding in the library or garden and sit with me, listening to my dreams and ideas with genuine interest. "You have a spark, Mackenzie," she would tell me. "Don't let anyone dim your light." But her support, though precious, was often overruled by the rest of the family. When she would defend me at dinner tables or praise my achievements, my parents would quickly change the subject, or my father would make a joke about Grandma's sentimental nature. The worst part wasn't just the favoritism or the criticism, it was the gaslighting that made me question my own experiences. If I confronted them about their treatment, I was too sensitive or making things up. If I achieved something impressive, the narrative would shift to how I'd had every advantage and should have done even better. By my mid-20s, I was a shell of myself, constantly seeking approval I never received and doubting my own perceptions and abilities. I had followed my father's career advice into a corporate marketing position I hated, lived in an apartment they deemed acceptable, and dated men from their approved social circle. On paper, I was successful. In reality, I was miserable, anxious, and increasingly aware that I was living someone else's idea of what my life should be. The dinner that changed everything happened 5 years ago, just after my 27th birthday. I had been secretly developing a business plan for months, working nights and weekends on a concept I truly believed in, a marketing agency specifically focused on sustainable and ethical brands. With growing consumer interest in environmental and social responsibility, I saw a market opportunity that aligned with my personal values. I had researched the industry, developed a unique approach, and even secured interest from a potential client. For once, I felt genuine excitement about my future. Foolishly, I decided to share this passion with my family. We were gathered at my parents' home for our monthly family dinner, a tradition my mother insisted upon to maintain the illusion of familial closeness. The dining room was immaculate as always, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, my mother's prized china set perfectly arranged. After the main course, heart-pounding, I shared my plans to leave my corporate job and launch my own agency. I explained the concept, the research I'd done, and my vision for creating a business that made a positive impact while also being profitable. The silence that followed felt eternal. Then my father laughed, not the reaction I had hoped for. "This is what happens when you read too many of those millennial business blogs," he said, cutting into his dessert. "Everyone thinks they can be an entrepreneur these days." My mother's brow furrowed with concern. "Darling, you have a stable job with excellent benefits. Why would you risk that for some trend?" "It's not a trend, Mom," I tried to explain. "Sustainable business practices are the future. There's real market demand for what I'm proposing." Emma, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "Actually, I've been reading about this space too. But honestly, Mackenzie, it's already oversaturated. The big agencies are all developing sustainability divisions. As a solo practitioner with no specialized experience, you'd be eaten alive." What she said next knocked the wind out of me. "Besides," she continued, swirling her wine glass, "I mentioned your little idea to Martin Reynolds when I saw him at the club last week. His agency handles several sustainable brands, and he said the approach you're considering is completely outdated." Martin Reynolds ran one of the largest marketing firms in Boston, and he was on my list of potential mentors I hoped to connect with. The fact that Emma had deliberately sabotaged my plans before I could even launch them felt like a knife to the heart. "You had no right to discuss my business idea with anyone," I said, my voice shaking. My father set down his fork with a decisive clink. "That's enough drama, Mackenzie. Emma was doing you a favor by getting professional feedback. This little scheme of yours would drain your savings and leave you crawling back to your job in 6 months, if they'd even take you back." "I've done my research, Dad. I have a solid business plan, and I've already spoken with potential clients who are interested." "Interested doesn't pay the bills," he scoffed. "Let me be clear. If you quit your job for this foolish dream, you're on your own. Don't expect any financial help from us when it fails." My mother reached across the table to pat my hand condescendingly. "Honey, you've always been so creative, but business requires a certain aptitude that's more in line with your sister's strengths. There's no shame in recognizing your limitations." Emma nodded in agreement, the picture of sympathetic wisdom. "I'm only trying to protect you from disappointment, Mac. Remember your jewelry-making phase in college? Or that blog you tried to monetize? Some people are meant to be entrepreneurs, and others are better suited to supporting roles." Each example she cited had been a genuine passion project that had brought me joy, not failures to be mocked. And each had ended partly because of my family's persistent undermining of my confidence. Grandma Ruth, who had been silently watching the exchange, finally spoke up. "I think Mackenzie's idea sounds wonderful. The world needs more businesses with conscience, and she's always had a good head for marketing." "Mom, please," my mother interrupted. "You don't understand the business world today. It's cutthroat. Mackenzie needs practical advice, not encouragement to chase fantasies. As they continued to dissect all the ways I would fail, something inside me finally broke. Or perhaps it finally healed. I realized with perfect clarity that I would never earn their approval, no matter what I achieved. And furthermore, I no longer wanted it. I stood up, my napkin falling to the floor. Thank you all for making your opinions so clear. I won't be discussing my business with any of you again. Don't be dramatic, Mackenzie, my father said dismissively. Sit down and finish your dessert. No, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I'm done. Not just with dinner, but with this. With all of you constantly undermining me and making me feel worthless. I'm starting my business, and I'm doing it without your support or approval. My mother gasped at my disobedience. Emma smirked slightly, clearly assuming I would fail without family backing. My father's face turned red with anger. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back until you come to your senses, he threatened. I looked at each of them, then at my grandmother whose eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and pride. I'll call you, Grandma, I said softly, then turned and walked out of my parents' house for what I thought might be the last time. The following weeks were a blur of logistics and emotions. I blocked my parents' and Emma's numbers after receiving a barrage of texts and calls ranging from angry demands to manipulative guilt trips. I moved to a smaller apartment in a different part of the city, withdrew my modest savings, and threw myself into launching my business. The only family contact I maintained was with Grandma Ruth, through occasional phone calls where we never discussed the rest of the family. Those conversations were lifelines during the darkest moments of my new independence. Starting over without a safety net was terrifying. My savings covered about 6 months of bare-bones living expenses, and I had no family support to fall back on if things went wrong. Those early days were fueled by equal parts determination and desperation. I converted my tiny apartment living room into an office space, creating a professional backdrop for video calls with potential clients. I lived on ramen and coffee, working 18-hour days to build my business from scratch. Each morning, I battled the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my father, telling me I was destined to fail. My concept for the agency, which I named True North Marketing, was to provide authentic, results-driven marketing strategies for companies committed to sustainability and ethical practices. But convincing clients to trust a new and proven agency was an uphill battle. The first 3 months were brutal. I pitched to dozens of companies and heard no more times than I could count. Many questioned my experience, my age, or whether a boutique agency could deliver the results they needed. Each rejection reinforced my family's criticism, making me question whether they had been right all along. The turning point came when I met Jessica Lynn at a sustainable business conference I had scraped together the last of my money to attend. Jessica had recently launched a line of biodegradable packaging products and was frustrated with her current marketing team's inability to communicate her brand's value effectively. After hearing me ask pointed questions during a panel discussion, she approached me during the networking hour. We connected instantly over our shared values and vision. When I explained my agency's approach to authentic marketing for sustainable brands, she actually listened without skepticism. You clearly understand this space in a way my current agency doesn't, she said. Would you be interested in pitching for our account? That pitch meeting was the most important of my life. I poured everything I had into preparing, researching her company thoroughly, and developing strategic recommendations that addressed her specific challenges. When I won the account, it wasn't just a professional victory, but personal validation that I hadn't been chasing a fantasy. Jessica became more than a client. She became a mentor who believed in me when few others did. With her account providing a financial foundation and a credible reference, I was able to pitch more confidently to other prospects. Slowly but surely, True North gained traction. I developed a proprietary approach that combined data-driven strategies with authentic storytelling, helping sustainable brands communicate their value beyond just being green. As word spread about our results, more clients came on board. By the end of the first year, I was able to hire my first employee, a brilliant digital strategist named Tara who shared my passion for purpose-driven brands. 6 months later, we added a content director and a design specialist to the team. The real breakthrough came in our second year when we landed Green Thread, a rapidly growing sustainable fashion brand with international presence. Their CMO had heard about our work from Jessica and reached out directly. The project was far larger than anything we'd handled before, but instead of being intimidated, I saw it as an opportunity to prove what we could do on a bigger stage. Our campaign for Green Thread exceeded all expectations, increasing their direct sales by 45% and earning industry recognition. Suddenly, True North wasn't just surviving. We were becoming known as the go-to agency for sustainable brands looking to scale their impact. By year 3, we had outgrown my apartment and moved into a proper office space in downtown Boston. By year 4, our team had expanded to 15 people, and we had clients across North America and Europe. We developed a fellowship program for marketing students interested in sustainability, created a pro bono initiative to support environmental nonprofits, and published research that established us as thought leaders in our niche. Throughout this growth, I was careful to build a company culture that was the antithesis of my family dynamics. At True North, every team member's contributions were recognized, collaboration was valued over competition, and achievement was celebrated without qualification. I wanted to create the supportive environment I had always craved. My personal growth paralleled my professional success. Free from my family's constant criticism, I gradually rediscovered my confidence. Through therapy, I began to recognize and heal from the patterns of emotional abuse that had shaped my self-perception. I developed genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or status. Tara became my closest friend, the sister I wished I'd had. Our friendship was built on mutual support and celebration of each other's strengths rather than competition. With her and a small circle of other close friends, I created the chosen family that provided the emotional support my biological family never had. I dated occasionally, taking time to unlearn the unhealthy relationship patterns I had absorbed growing up. I became more comfortable with setting boundaries, expressing my needs, and recognizing red flags that reminded me of my family dynamics. Through it all, my occasional calls with Grandma Ruth continued, though they became less frequent as her health began to decline. She never pressured me to reconnect with the family, respecting my boundaries in a way no one else had. I sent her cards on holidays and her birthday, but maintained my distance from everyone else. As for my family, I heard snippets of information through the Boston business grapevine. My father had retired from his firm. My mother was still active in the same social circles. Emma had married a wealthy real estate developer named Blake Thompson and had started some type of consulting business. I took no pleasure in imagining their reaction if they knew about my success, but I admit I sometimes wondered if they ever regretted their lack of faith in me. Mostly, though, I was too busy building my new life to dwell on the past. Then, after 5 years of silence, the elegant ivory envelope arrived with the invitation to Grandma Ruth's 80th birthday celebration. And everything changed. The invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I could bring myself to respond. Heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing announced a celebration at Bellini's, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. My grandmother deserved such a celebration, but the thought of facing my family again made my chest tighten with anxiety. "You don't have to go," Tara said when I showed her the invitation during our weekly dinner at my apartment. "You've been doing amazingly well without them in your life. Why risk reopening old wounds?" She was right, of course. The emotional distance I'd established had been essential to my healing process. Yet something about turning 80 felt significant, a milestone I didn't want my grandmother to celebrate without me. "I'll call her," I decided. See if this was actually her idea or if my mother's orchestrating it. That evening, I dialed the familiar number, half expecting my mother to answer. Instead, Grandma Ruth's voice came through, sounding older but with the same warmth I remembered. "Mackenzie, darling. What a wonderful surprise. I was just thinking about you." We exchanged pleasantries, and I asked about her health, which she dismissed with her typical, "I'm still kicking" response. Then I mentioned the invitation. "I received your birthday invitation," I said carefully. "It looks like it will be a lovely celebration." "Oh, I do hope you'll come," she said, a note of genuine eagerness in her voice. "I know things have been difficult with the family, but I'd love to see you. It's been too long." "Who else will be there?" I asked, needing to prepare myself. "Just a small gathering. Your parents, Emma and Blake, a few of my old friends." She paused. "I understand if it's too much, but it would mean the world to me to have you there." The sincerity in her voice tugged at my heart. Throughout my childhood, Grandma Ruth had been the one person who made me feel seen and valued. Could I really refuse her this request? "I'll be there," I promised, already feeling a mix of dread and determination. "For you." After hanging up, I began to analyze the situation more carefully. The invitation had been in Emma's handwriting, not my mother's as would be expected for a family event. Why would Emma be handling the invitations? And why reach out now after 5 years of silence? Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. I decided to proceed with caution, preparing myself both practically and emotionally for whatever might await me at the celebration. I spent the following week strategizing as though preparing for a high-stakes business meeting. I selected an outfit that projected confidence without ostentation, a tailored navy dress that exuded professional success without being flashy. I rehearsed neutral responses to potential probing questions about my life and business. I planned an early exit strategy in case things became uncomfortable. Most importantly, I worked with my therapist on maintaining emotional boundaries. We practiced techniques for staying centered when faced with triggering comments or situations. I reminded myself that I was no longer the insecure young woman desperate for their approval. "You're choosing to attend this dinner from a position of strength," my therapist emphasized. "You get to decide how much to share and how long to stay. Your worth isn't determined by their validation." As the day approached, I made practical arrangements as well. I booked a room at the Four Seasons rather than staying at my parents' house, rented a car for independence, and scheduled important meetings for the following morning as a built-in excuse for leaving early if needed. The drive back to Boston stirred a complex mixture of emotions. As I passed familiar landmarks from my childhood, memories surfaced unbidden. The park where my father had taught Emma to ride a bike, but was always too busy when it came my turn. The ice cream shop where my mother would reward Emma's achievements while reminding me I needed to watch my weight. The library where I often took refuge from the tension at home. Yet alongside these painful recollections were newer associations. The coffee shop where I'd drafted my business plan, the conference center where I'd landed my first major client, the office building where True North had first established itself. This city held the story of both my wounds and my triumph. As I checked into my hotel, I received a text from Tara. "Remember who you are now. Call me anytime if you need backup. Love you." Her support steadied me as I prepared for the evening ahead. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized the confident woman who looked back at me compared to the broken person who had fled her family dinner 5 years earlier. Whatever happened tonight, I knew I would leave on my own terms this time. Bellini's was even more opulent than I remembered, with its crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and impeccable service. I arrived precisely on time, not wanting to be either the first or last to appear. The maitre d' escorted me to a private dining room at the back of the restaurant, each step bringing me closer to a confrontation 5 years in the making. As the door opened, all conversation ceased. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to calculation to genuine pleasure. Grandma Ruth, seated at the head of the table, broke the silence. "Mackenzie," she exclaimed, her face lighting up. You came. I moved to her first, leaning down to embrace her frail form, breathing in the familiar scent of her Chanel No. 5 perfume. Happy birthday, Grandma. I wouldn't have missed it. Only after that genuine moment did I turn to acknowledge the others. My parents had aged visibly, father's hair now completely silver, mother's face showing new lines despite what I suspected were regular cosmetic procedures. They offered stiff greetings, clearly unsure how to interact with the daughter who had defied them. Emma looked essentially the same, perfectly coiffed and dressed in a designer outfit that screamed old money. What struck me was the barely concealed anticipation in her eyes, like someone waiting for a show to begin. Beside her sat a man I assumed was her husband Blake, handsome in a conventional way, but with a nervous energy that seemed at odds with the confident image he tried to project. Two elderly couples, friends of my grandmother, rounded out the party, offering welcoming smiles that held no history or judgment. "You're looking well," my mother said, her tone suggesting surprise as she assessed my appearance. "Thank you," I replied simply, taking the empty seat across from Emma rather than beside her. "Life has been good to me." "We heard you started some sort of business," my father said, his dismissive tone suggesting he assumed it was a small, struggling operation. "Marketing, wasn't it?" "Yes, True North Marketing. We specialize in sustainable and ethical brands," I replied, offering no additional details about our success or size. Emma leaned forward, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How fascinating. That must be so fulfilling, even if it's not particularly lucrative. I always admired your willingness to pursue passion over profit." The condescension was familiar, but its power to hurt me had diminished considerably over the years. "It can certainly be both," I responded evenly. As servers appeared with the first course, I noticed my father studying me with narrowed eyes, perhaps registering the quality of my attire or the quiet confidence in my posture that hadn't been there before. Throughout the appetizer and main course, the conversation maintained a veneer of civility. My parents spoke of their recent travels, Emma mentioned charity events she had chaired, and Blake made awkward attempts at humor that fell flat. I redirected questions about my life with vague pleasantries, sharing nothing of substance about my business or personal achievements. Gradually, I became aware of something odd. Several times when I glanced around the restaurant, I noticed the same few people at nearby tables who seemed to be watching our gathering with unusual interest. One man in particular, seated alone with a perfect view of our table, kept looking up from his phone whenever Emma spoke. The questioning about my life grew more pointed as dinner progressed. "So, where exactly is your office located?" Emma asked casually. "Do you have many employees, or is it just you?" my father probed. "Have you worked with any brands we might recognize?" my mother inquired. Each question felt less like genuine interest and more like fact-checking. I provided minimal answers, increasingly certain that something was amiss. Blake seemed uncomfortable with the interrogation, occasionally shooting apologetic glances my way. During a momentary lull when Emma excused herself to the restroom, he leaned slightly toward me. "Your grandmother speaks very highly of you," he said quietly. "She's very proud." Before I could respond, Emma returned, placing a proprietary hand on his shoulder. The gesture seemed possessive rather than affectionate. "What are you two discussing?" she asked with artificial lightness. "Just complimenting Grandma's choice of restaurant," Blake replied, avoiding her eyes. As dessert was served, an elaborate cake wheeled in for my grandmother. I caught Emma checking her watch and nodding slightly toward the man at the nearby table. A chill ran down my spine as pieces began falling into place. This wasn't just an awkward family reunion, it was some kind of setup. My suspicions were confirmed when Emma straightened in her chair after receiving a text message, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Whatever she had planned was about to unfold, and from her expression, she believed it would not end well for me. I reached for my water glass, steadying my hand with determination. 5 years ago, I had fled from their judgment. Tonight, whatever Emma had orchestrated, I would face it head-on. As the servers cleared the dessert plates, Emma rose to her feet, champagne glass in hand. Her posture was perfect, her expression a masterpiece of practiced sincerity that I recognized from countless family gatherings where appearances mattered more than truth. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, drawing all eyes to her. "To Grandma Ruth on her 80th birthday. Your wisdom and love have guided this family through so much." Everyone raised their glasses, murmuring agreement. Emma, however, wasn't finished. "This is a celebration not just of age, but of values. Values like honesty, integrity, and living authentic lives." Her gaze fixed pointedly on me. "Which is why I think tonight is the perfect opportunity for us to clear the air and embrace truth. Don't you agree, Mackenzie?" The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. My parents exchanged glances, a mixture of confusion and anticipation on their faces. Grandma Ruth frowned slightly, clearly not having anticipated this turn of events. "I'm not sure what you mean, Emma," I replied evenly, refusing to be baited. Emma's smile widened as she set down her glass. "I think you do. For 5 years, you've been out of our lives, supposedly building this successful business and new identity for yourself. But families shouldn't have secrets, should they?" She snapped her fingers, and the man I had noticed watching our table approached, carrying a leather portfolio. He nodded deferentially to Emma before placing the portfolio on the table in front of her. "This is Marcus Jennings, a private investigator with Redwood Security," Emma announced to the stunned table. "I hired him 3 months ago to find out the truth about Mackenzie's life after she cut us off so dramatically." Gasps came from around the table. My grandmother's face paled, and my father leaned forward with sudden interest. My mother pressed her hand to her chest in a gesture of shock that seemed rehearsed. "Emma, is this really necessary?" Blake muttered, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "It absolutely is," Emma insisted, opening the portfolio and removing several identical manila folders. "Family healing can only begin with honesty." Mackenzie walked out on us claiming she was going to build this amazing, independent life. I think we deserve to know the reality. She distributed the folders around the table, saving one for herself and placing one directly in front of me with a smirk of anticipated victory. "Go ahead," she urged everyone. "See for yourselves." My heart hammered in my chest, not from fear of what they might find, but from anger at the invasion of privacy and the public ambush. For a moment, I considered walking out, refusing to participate in Emma's spectacle. But curiosity won out. What exactly did Emma think she had discovered? As everyone opened their folders, I did the same. Inside was a professionally prepared report complete with photographs, financial data, and detailed information about True North marketing. The silence that fell over the table was profound. I watched as expressions changed from anticipation to confusion to disbelief. My father's eyebrows rose higher with each page he turned. My mother's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. Blake looked from the report to me with new respect in his eyes. Emma, scanning her own copy, looked increasingly perplexed. "This can't be right," she muttered, flipping pages more rapidly. The report detailed True North's growth into a multi-million-dollar agency with offices in Boston, New York, and San Francisco. It listed our blue-chip clients, industry awards, and recent feature in Forbes as one of the fastest-growing agencies in the sustainable business sector. There were photographs of me speaking at international conferences, at charity galas with recognizable business leaders, and cutting the ribbon at our new headquarters. The financial section outlined the company's impressive revenue growth, my personal net worth, and recent philanthropic foundation I had established to support environmental education initiatives. You have 38 employees." My father finally broke the silence, his voice hollow with disbelief. 42 now," I corrected calmly. "The report is a few months old." "Your agency handles marketing for Green Thread? And Ecolux?" "Those are major brands," my mother said, naming 2 high-profile sustainable luxury companies. Emma was still frantically searching through the pages. There must be some mistake. This says you purchased a brownstone in Beacon Hill last year. That's a multi-million-dollar property. No mistake, I confirmed. I've always loved that neighborhood. The investigator, still standing nearby, cleared his throat. I can assure you the information is accurate, Ms. Walker. We conducted a thorough investigation as requested. Emma's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. But you were supposed to, she began, then caught herself. Before she could respond, Blake was leafing through additional pages at the back of the report, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Emma, what is this section about us? This wasn't part of what you said you were investigating. Emma grabbed the pages from him, her face draining of color as she scanned the content. I smiled for the first time that evening. Oh, did I forget to mention? I've known about your investigation for weeks, Emma. When my security team flagged unusual interest in my activities, I hired my own investigator to find out who was looking into me. When I discovered it was you, I paid him double to return the favor. All eyes turned to Emma, who was now gripping the table edge. Apparently, I continued, addressing the table at large, Emma and Blake are facing some significant financial difficulties. 3 mortgages on underwater properties, credit card debt in the high 6 figures, and a consulting business that exists primarily on paper but has no actual clients. Oh, and there's that interesting matter of the Thompson Family Foundation, where donor funds seem to have been redirected to personal expenses. That's a lie. Emma exploded, but her voice trembled. Blake put his head in his hands. It's not a lie, Emma. We're nearly bankrupt, and the foundation irregularities could lead to criminal charges if discovered. My father turned to Emma with fury in his eyes. Is this true? You've been lying about your finances? About your business success? The perfect daughter isn't so perfect after all, I observed quietly. The chaos that erupted at the table gave me a moment to center myself. My parents were demanding explanations from Emma, who was frantically attempting to deflect and minimize the revelations. Blake looked defeated, staring at his hands while occasionally nodding in confirmation of particularly damning details. Through it all, my grandmother sat watching with a strange expression that combined sadness with what almost looked like satisfaction. I stood up, tapping my water glass gently with a spoon. The clear ring cut through the arguing voices, drawing everyone's attention. I think we've had enough drama for one evening, I said calmly. This was meant to be Grandma Ruth's birthday celebration, not a family therapy session. You orchestrated this, Emma accused, desperate to shift blame. You turned my own investigator against me. I shook my head. No, Emma. You set this trap yourself. I just decided not to play the role you assigned me. I turned to address the entire table, standing tall in a way I never could have 5 years earlier. For most of my life, I believed what you told me about myself. That I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or capable enough. That I needed your approval and support to succeed. Walking away from this family was the hardest and best decision I ever made. My father started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. The truth is, I didn't build True North to prove anything to any of you. I built it because I believed in the work and in myself. The success came because without your constant criticism and undermining, I could finally recognize my own value and abilities. I gestured toward the reports still open on the table. So yes, I've done well. Better than any of you imagined I could. But the true success isn't in those financial figures or client lists. It's in creating a life and a company built on authentic values rather than appearances. My mother, ever concerned with salvaging social situations, attempted to pivot. Well, we're very proud of what you've accomplished, darling. We always knew you had potential. The audacity of her revisionist history might once have infuriated me. Now it just seemed sad and predictable. No, you didn't, I replied simply. But that's okay. I didn't need you to believe in me. I learned to believe in myself. I turned to Emma, whose expression fluctuated between anger and fear. I'm not going to expose your financial problems or the foundation irregularities. That's not why I'm here tonight. Relief flashed across her face, quickly replaced by suspicion. Then why did you come? For Grandma Ruth, I said, turning toward our grandmother with genuine warmth. The only person in this family who ever saw me clearly and loved me unconditionally. My grandmother reached for my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength for her age. There's one more thing you should know, I added, looking around the table. I own this restaurant. I purchased it last year when the previous owner decided to retire. I keep my ownership quiet because I prefer to be treated like any other guest when I dine here. The shock on their faces at this final revelation was almost comical. My father, who had taken me to this very restaurant for my 16th birthday and lectured me about the level of success required to dine at such an establishment regularly, looked as though he might fall out of his chair. You own Bellini's, he repeated incredulously. Among other investments, I confirmed. The staff knew exactly who I was the moment I walked in tonight. Emma's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. So this whole evening, you've been, laughing at us? Enjoying our ignorance? Not at all, I replied honestly. I came to celebrate Grandma's birthday and to close this chapter of my life. For years, I've carried the weight of your disapproval and rejection. Tonight, I'm setting that burden down for good. I turned to my grandmother again. I'd like to speak with you privately before I go, if that's all right. She nodded, and I helped her to her feet. As we walked toward a small sitting area in the corner of the private dining room, I heard my parents beginning to interrogate Emma about the financial revelations, their voices tight with controlled fury. In the relative privacy of the sitting area, my grandmother took both my hands in hers. I knew you would do well, Mackenzie, she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. But even I didn't imagine just how far you would go. Why didn't you tell them about my success? I asked curiously. We've spoken occasionally over the years. You knew I wasn't struggling. She smiled enigmatically. Some lessons need to be learned firsthand. Your parents and sister needed to face the consequences of their treatment of you. Understanding dawned. You knew about Emma's plan, didn't you? This whole birthday dinner was a setup, but not the way she intended. Let's just say I had my suspicions about why Emma suddenly wanted to include you after 5 years of silence, she admitted. And I may have encouraged her to proceed with whatever she was planning. I laughed softly, amazed by my grandmother's quiet cunning. You orchestrated this whole confrontation. I'm 80 years old, dear. I don't have time for gradual reconciliations. Her expression grew serious. But there's something else you should know. I've been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 3 to 6 months. The news hit me like a physical blow. Grandma, no. There must be treatments, specialists we could consult. She shook her head firmly. I've explored all options. I've made my peace with it. But I couldn't go without seeing justice done and without telling you how proud I am of the woman you've become. Tears welled in my eyes as I embraced her. I wish we had more time. We'll make the most of what we have, she promised. Which brings me to a request. I'd like to spend my remaining time getting to know the real you and your life, away from this family drama. Would you consider letting me stay with you for a while? The request surprised me, but filled me with unexpected joy. Of course, I'd love nothing more. As we returned to the table, the atmosphere was glacial. Emma sat rigid beside Blake, who looked both relieved and terrified, as though a great deception had been uncovered, but the consequences were still unfolding. My parents were uncharacteristically silent, their carefully constructed family narrative in shambles around them. I've asked Mackenzie if I might stay with her for a time, my grandmother announced to the stunned table. And she has graciously agreed. But Mother, your care, your medications, my mother began to protest, are all perfectly manageable with the right support, which Mackenzie can provide, Grandma Ruth stated firmly. My mind is made up. As we prepared to leave, my father made one last attempt to reassert control over the situation. Mackenzie, perhaps we should discuss this further. Now that we understand your circumstances, I think we could find a way to reintegrate you into the family. The conditional nature of his offer said everything about why I had left in the first place. Thank you, but no, I replied. My circumstances haven't changed who I am, only your perception of my worth. I'm not interested in being reintegrated into a family that only values success rather than character. I helped my grandmother into her coat, then addressed the table one final time. I wish you all well, truly. But my family now includes people who support me unconditionally, celebrate my successes without envy, and help me learn from my failures without judgment. I've found what I was looking for all along. With that, I escorted my grandmother from the restaurant, leaving behind the weight of expectations and conditional love I had carried for so long. As we stepped into the cool evening air, Grandma Ruth squeezed my arm gently. "That's my girl," she whispered. "That's my brave, brilliant girl." The next 6 months were precious beyond measure. Grandma Ruth moved into my guest suite, where she delighted in getting to know my friends, visiting the True North offices, and hearing stories about my journey that I had never shared with anyone in the family. Her presence brought a healing completion to the narrative of my life, reconnecting me to the one positive thread from my childhood. When she passed peacefully in her sleep just after the 6-month mark, I mourned deeply but without regret. We had used our time well, creating memories untainted by the toxic dynamics that had shaped our earlier relationship. In her honor, I established the Ruth Walker Scholarship Foundation, providing educational opportunities to young women from difficult family circumstances who showed entrepreneurial promise. It felt like the perfect way to extend her legacy of seeing potential where others saw only limitations. As for my parents and Emma, I maintained polite distance. They attended Grandma Ruth's funeral, of course, but our interactions remained formal and brief. Some rifts cannot and perhaps should not be fully repaired. The true legacy of that confrontational birthday dinner wasn't vengeance or vindication, though those elements were certainly present in the moment. It was the final release from seeking external validation, the freedom to define success on my own terms, and the knowledge that family can be chosen rather than merely inherited. So that's my story. I'd love to know if any of you have had similar experiences with family members who couldn't see your potential until it was validated by external success. Have you had to distance yourself from toxic relationships to grow? How did you handle the inevitable confrontations? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and share with someone who might need to hear that success is the best revenge, but healing is the best success. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into.